Proverbs, and they're about finances. And most of what I'm going to tell you, you've heard before. It's the same thing your grandmother would tell you, but I'm going to keep my teeth in while I do it. Very simply put, the foundation of financial prosperity is living on less than you make and having a savings account that is large enough to cover emergencies. That's kind of it in a nutshell. So, and I'll show you where this all comes out of Proverbs. You live on less than you make, and you have a savings account for when Murphy shows up, and that's going to cover emergencies. You are in a safe place. And in that safe place, then, you have the ability, because you're earning less than you make, you have that extra income that you can begin to use so that it's not just you earning money, it's your money also earning more money. So, the way that is done, to put it in today's terms, is you need a budget. You look at a budget, and you look at a budget for a month, and you look at what you're going to have coming in this month and what you're going to have going out, and you want to make sure that the money doesn't run out before the month runs out, that you're going to be living on less than you make. So looking at budgets, for instance, Joseph was given a divine budget for Egypt when he was there. He interpreted Pharaoh's dreams of the 7 years of prosperity and 7 years of famine, and produced a budget and told Pharaoh, appoint people over everything, and as they collect all of the produce for these 7 years, each year take a fifth of it and put it in storage and save it for the lean years. So that's the concept of saving for things that you don't know. Emergencies happen, Murphy shows up. Dave Ramsey was counseling an older couple, and he was going over this, and she says, oh yeah, that's my GOK account. And Dave asked her, what is a GOK account? And she says, God only knows. Because God only knows what can happen, what will come around the next corner. And you have to be prepared for it. We'll get into some specifics at the end. Make a note here. All right, I want to look at some scriptures about this and where this comes from. So Proverbs 27:23 says, be diligent to know the state of your flocks and attend to your herds. So in modern day language, Ben Franklin worked that into one of his own proverbs, and his proverb goes like this. He says, if you take care of your business will take care of you. So the idea is to spend time to do the budgeting, be diligent in knowing, and that's what a budget is. You're aware of what's going to be coming in and what you plan to spend, and it's to be diligent to know. And as you apply yourself to that, you'll find, well, let me go on. Proverbs 21:20, I'm getting ahead of myself there. Proverbs 21:20, there is desirable treasure and oil in the dwelling of the wise, but a foolish man squanders it. So that the idea there is the foolish man spends every penny that comes in the door. The wise man, however, saves up, has stores of things. In that day it was oil and, wealth in that day was fields and flocks and oil, etc. And they had currency too. So the idea is to be a wise person and to watch after your flocks. You're going to have some savings. Another item to look at when you're budgeting is to have somebody doing it with you. And the idea there, for instance, husbands and wives should do that together because they keep each other accountable. If you're single, have what's called an accountability partner. And what that does is the other person immediately cuts through how you might lie to yourself about your budget. So for instance, a way that maybe I lie to myself is I say, exercise is a priority. But every month, if I look back on the previous month, I didn't do any of it. So your accountability partner will say, are you sure that should be in the budget? Because you don't do it. So that's an important thing. And there's a proverb for that also. Proverbs 11:14 says, where there is no counsel, people fall. But in the multitude of counselors, there is safety. All right, and here is coming after our identity, and we talked about this on Saturday. Where our heart is and what our identity is as we approach a budget and as we approach how we manage our finances. Proverbs 3 verses 9 and 10 says, honor the Lord with your possessions and with your first fruits of all your increase, so your barns will be filled with plenty and your vats will overflow with new wine. The idea there in this concept of honoring the Lord with a tenth of what comes in, or a tithing, it says here of all of our increase, that's not a Mosaic law, it's not a legal concept, it's a spiritual concept. It was first mentioned in Genesis when Abraham had rescued his brother Lot one more time and was coming back across the plains, and a priest that they say is the type and shadow of Jesus met him, Melchizedek, and said Melchizedek was the high priest of Salem. And Abraham gave Melchizedek a tenth of all of his pillage, everything that he had gotten in the battle. And it said Melchizedek blessed him. This was before God had even made a covenant with Abraham. So I believe it's in chapter 11 that Abraham meets Melchizedek, but it's immediately after meeting Melchizedek that God makes a covenant with Abraham and asks him to sacrifice the animals, and in the smoke that's going up, God makes the covenant with Abraham into Abraham's seed and his children's children. So it was before covenant, centuries before Moses and the law was given, and it comes out of righteousness that Abraham's belief in what he was doing, God says it was attributed to him as righteousness. Another way to look at giving and tithing from everything we've been taught about our identity and who we are, Ryan made a comment that he said came from Richard Hayes in Monterey, and that is all behavior comes out of our identity. It's who do we believe we are. And if we don't believe that we're in one way or another, we won't act in that way. The truth of our identity is that we are committed. We're in the nature of God. God's in commitment and loving. We are extravagant, loving givers. God was an extravagant, loving giver. And I'll give just a personal testimony here. Long ago, far away, in fact, it was 32 years ago, I was an elder of a church in Maryland, and I wasn't tithing. I didn't think it was my identity, didn't think it was necessary, etc. But I was an elder, and it finally came around, and I was confronted with this. How are you, as an elder, not tithing? And I was immediately, I'm looking, where's the fig leaf, when you need it. And the thought I had at the time was, I can't afford to tithe. The end of the month comes before, or the end of the end of the income runs out before the end of the month comes, and I couldn't afford to tithe. So if you look at that in terms of identity, was I saying, I don't earn enough now, I can't tithe? When I earn enough, then I'll tithe. That sounds like do, get. We need to break that lie. Now I realize, I was in that place. Many people are in that place, and I've seen many people come out of that place where it doesn't change the reality that you're somewhere where the income runs out before the end of the month, and there are ways of dealing with that, and we'll get into some of those. But finally, and I struggled with that. Then there was a period of time where I struggled. Okay, I know I need to tithe. I know it's a spiritual thing. I should be doing it. How do I do it? And I struggled and I struggled. How do I do it? Finally, Terry and I, we got to the point where I said, you know what? I don't care. I'm going to do it. And at that point, our income just changed. And I've shared this. I've shared it with Ryan. I've shared it with other people. And they say you would be surprised at how many people have that same testimony, that when you start giving, you'll see it. John Crowder, who was here for the conference, he didn't cover this in the conference. The week before he was here, Terry and I saw him in Santa Cruz, California. We were out visiting our kids. He happened to be in town, so we went out, of course, to see him. And he talked about the sowing and reaping, the laws of sowing and reaping and consequences, etc., of our actions. And he said it was uncanny to he and his wife that the first, this giving thing, and they didn't know quite how to step into it. The first time came where God told them to give $1,000 somewhere, and they weren't sure. What are we going to do? They're on what you call irregular income. You never know how much is going to come in. So they were faithful. They gave the $1,000. Within 2 months, they had $10,000 come in. And then he said, sometime later, whether it was 6 months or a year later, the next big test was he says the first time it was a big one for them. First time they were called on to give $15,000. And they did it. And he says, as many times as they've walked through that door wondering, can we do this, when they're hearing God, God has been faithful and faithful and faithful. you cannot outgive God. And this is not a formula that I'm going to drop something in the offering basket so I can, get. What this is learning how to follow a spirit in your heart and be a giver. It's following the heart. It's like you don't set on this path of financial prosperity because you want to become wealthy. That love of money isn't going to take you the right place. What you do is you get closer to God, you get closer to what God says about finances, and you start acting the way God acts, and God says, that's wonderful. You've got all the love that goes with all that, and guess what? I'm going to add everything on with it, and it's a byproduct. Don't ever turn your eyes to the money on this thing. Just follow the Lord, and you'll see that God blesses, and he blesses, and he blesses. Here, hang on just a second.
And it's also like a farmer that has like a 50-acre field who's going to go sow a bunch of corn. He's not going to go out there and be like, oh, let's see if I get something this year. He's going to go out and plant the corn after he tills it and waters it and does what he needs to do, expecting to get ears. And I've heard, I'm not just 100% sure on the number, but I've heard that 1 ear of corn has up to 200 kernels on it, 250 kernels on it. So, and that might be lowballing it also. So one seed plants one corn stalk, and how many ears of corn do you get? And then keep multiplying that. So farmer goes out, plants a seed expecting to get back. He goes out and plants apple trees expecting to get apples back. Not, oh, let's see what happens this year. We should be the same in our sowing and our reaping, the same.
That's a wonderful analogy. That it reminds me, there's another analogy about tithing that's spot on, and it's about a farmer and planting seed and then reaping everything that comes in. So all of the seed that comes in, 90% of it is used to take care of his household, his family, and business, etc. 10% goes in sacks and sits in the storehouse until next spring, because that's the seed for next year. And the principle around this is, if, like the foolish guy that spends every penny that comes in, if the farmer eats his seed, he's got 1 year. On the other hand, if a farmer gives away half of the corn for produce and plants all that, there's not enough for the household. He's not taking care of the household or his business, etc. So there's a balance that God wants us, and it's in my mind, it's all tied up in the law of life and death, in seeds and planting. And
listening to the Holy Spirit.
Yes, absolutely, listening to the Holy Spirit. Proverbs 13:11. So when you look at your budget, you got what you're spending, and you're able to control what you spend. Sometimes it takes major shifts. And I'll give you an example, one Terry and I went through, to control how you change levels of spending. The other side of the equation is your income. And we're to be productive, we're to be creative, and that brings income, etc. But Proverbs 13:11 is very important. It says, wealth gained hastily will dwindle, but whoever gathers little by little will increase. The idea is, don't go chasing after those get-rich-quick schemes. They're all over. They've been around for thousands of years, and there's a principle around that too. There are books been written about the topic where people that win millions and millions of dollars in the lottery. Within a couple of years, they're back to the same place they were before. You know, the millions, if it had been managed properly and they could live off interest for the rest of their life and give an inheritance to their children and their children's children, but it's the foolish person that spends everything that comes in. And I think there's an aspect to it too, that if it comes in too easily, you don't appreciate the value of what came in. You know, when you earn it and it comes in, you have a value for it.
Life insurance is the same way.
Yeah. Proverbs 11:15. This is a very important one, and this goes into areas of debt. So 11:15, and this is King James verbiage, but it says, "He who is surety for a stranger will suffer, but one who hates being surety is secure." What surety means, you've gone into debt. So if you're going into debt, you're going to suffer. But if you hate debt, you will be secure. And that goes hand in hand with Proverbs 22, verse 7. 22:7, we've heard this before, I believe. "The rich rules over the poor, and the borrower is servant to the lender." So, next week we're going to talk about a lot of misconceptions that people have, and there's myths in our culture. One of the myths in our culture is always going to have a car payment. You can't get by if you don't have a car payment. And, you know, there's a lot of myths this way, and there is a way to live completely debt-free. And this is the manner that God wants us to live, that we are the lenders and we are not the borrowers. So, and again, this goes to the point where at some point in time you learn these principles and you think, man, my monthly budget is a dog. That thing won't run if I kicked it in the rear end. My budget is a dog. And it means it's a bad budget. It means you've got more month than there is income. So Proverbs 6:5, or Proverbs 6 verses 1 through 5 deals with this. And it's, "My son, if you have become surety for a friend, or if you've gone into debt, if you had shaken hands in pledge for a stranger, you are snared by the words of your mouth." You're caught up. You're now a servant to that lender. You are snared by the words of your mouth. You are taken by the words of your mouth. So do this. Here's what you do. Do this, my son, and deliver yourself. You have come into the hand of your friend. Go and humble yourself. Plead with your friend. Give no sleep to your eyes, nor slumber to your eyelids. Deliver yourself like a gazelle from the hand of the hunter, and a bird from the hand of the fowler. So, during Dave Ramsey's classes, he talks about predatory practices. I call them predatory. I mean, people are just doing business. Credit card companies. They're out selling their product, and one of the places they go is they go to colleges, because their marketing studies have shown that the first credit card you get, you have an attachment to that. So if it's a Visa, if it's a MasterCard, if it's a Discover, whatever it is, there's an attachment to that one, and it is your preferred credit vehicle. So when a bank sends you a credit card, they're going to charge, I don't know what the 12% interest. I don't know what the rates are right now. It used to be 18. Some are 21% interest. If you go and you put your money, say you got a savings account, you got married, you're in college, you're just getting married, and you go put $5,000 in a savings account because you want a nest egg for those emergencies. And then you come along and you see the marketing and this credit card is free. The bank sees you've got $5,000 in there. You're a prime target to get one of their cards. And they get you a credit card in their hand and you say to yourself, well, I don't need it, but you know what I'm going to do is just for an emergency, it's in the wallet and you have it. And the couple goes through a year or two and the kids running around and they're sitting at Thanksgiving dinner and all of a sudden they go, oh no, Christmas is coming in December this year. Like who knew? And they hadn't, their nest egg isn't there. They've had to use it for another emergency. And they pull the credit card out for Christmas shopping just because it's an emergency. And, it's behavior, and the credit card companies and the banks are masterful at marketing and trying to induce that behavior. You can go have fun, use MasterCard, you want that vacation, and all of these kind of things. So that $5,000 you put in the bank to save, which may or may not be there now, you might have been getting 2% on it. I don't know what rates are right now. But the bank is then using money to lending you money at 12%. This is why your house looks like this and the bank looks like this. It's because banks know how that works. And it's all about compound interest. And if you have that interest being attached to you on debt that's not it's not paid off, you're just servicing the debt every month, you're paying a little bit, the part you didn't pay had interest added to it, and there's even more in principal the next time, etc. So whatever you didn't pay, interest is added in even though you paid it down, then it goes up a little, down, up a little. So all those little ups add to the typical home mortgage. $100,000 home mortgage over 30 years, by the time you're done paying it, might be $300,000. The idea is if you pay cash for things and you get out of debt, you don't have debt, then your extra income, instead of going out and buying that motorcycle this week because you got a credit card and you want it now, you wait until you've saved up, you pay cash for it, and that motorcycle costs $25,000 and it doesn't end up costing $70,000 because you paid over time. So over time then, your savings, they're getting some interest. But in addition to that, you want to start doing investing. And it's when you have income to start doing investing that really can get traction. So what the bank was doing with you loaning you money, you were doing with the stock market loaning it money. Now again, you're going to hear horror stories about the stock market crash and I lost everything. Over time, over any 10-year period of time, your money is going to be better in the stock market, and we'll talk about ways to do that, than it is in savings or anything else. So investing is like this. You're investing because your investments bring interest. That's called passive income. So do you remember when you were a child and you had a bicycle and you had to go up a steep hill and it was too much? It was too steep to go straight up that hill. So the way that you would do it, if there was no traffic, you would go back and forth on the road and you'd make a little bit of progress each time. That's this verse. Whoever gathers little by little will increase. So eventually, you go little by little by little by little, and you keep at it. And that process, it's like the storybook. One fellow said, it doesn't matter how many times I read that book. It does not matter. Every time I read it, the tortoise wins, not the hare. Don't go and try to get rich quick, just little by little by little by little. And eventually, when you're riding that bike, you get to the top of the hill. And you realize at the top of the hill, the next side, it's coasting, man. It is no work. You're going to have the wind to your face, and you can rest on the way down. When you are investing, do you know how you know when you've reached that top of the hill? You have reached the top of that hill when your investments make more for you in the last year than you made for yourself. Because then you don't have to do the work yourself, your investments do it, and you have that income. And it'll keep growing because the investments keep growing. That is a godly principle in building wealth. In this proverb about getting rid of debt, Dave was talking about, he was wondering, what does this mean, deliver yourself like the gazelle from the hand of the hunter? And he was praying about that, and it was one of those God things, because they had the Discovery Channel on, and they were showing wildlife pictures of animals in Africa. And they showed gazelles, and the gazelle herd was there, and they said, oh, watch, the tiger is sneaking through the grass. Watch what happens. And as soon as one gazelle noticed the tiger, there was a signal went out, and the entire herd took off. And the tigers is it the jaguar, I think, is the fastest beast in the world. Most of the time, the gazelles do get away, and it's their instincts to run. And this idea about getting away from the gazelle, like a gazelle from the hand of the hunter, you need to be inspired to get rid of that debt. And it's like your radar goes off and you yell, kids, run. Don't get the Visa t-shirt at college, run. It's a leopard, it's a tiger, it's a jaguar. Don't grab those credit cards. Or the bird from the hand of the fowler. Because the hunter and the fowler, the idea is to entrap. And people get entrapped by debt, and they get chained, and you can't get out of it. And so you have to be driven to dump that debt and get out of it. And we will, I'll mention about budgeting lessons and how to do that when you have problems doing it. But it takes changes in behavior to do all of this. If, for instance, somebody, we talked about the lottery winners. Their behavior didn't change, and they ended up in the same place they were. They just had more resources to do the same thing as they had been doing, which is spending all they had to have fun, et cetera, et cetera. Changing behavior It may take coaching, takes a lot of love sometimes, etc. I want to read some verses from Hebrew about correcting our behaviors. Hebrews chapter 12, verse 6 says, "My son, do not despise the chastening of the Lord, nor be discouraged when you are rebuked by him. For whom the Lord loves, he chastens, and scourges every son whom he receives." And then a little further down in Hebrews 12, chapter 11, it says, "Now chastening seems to be joyful for, or no chastening seems to be joyful for the present, but rather painful. Nevertheless, afterward it yields the peaceable fruit of righteousness to those who have been trained by it." I want to read those because the King James verses use some, what I might call some harsh language there. I'm going to read them from the Mirror Bible. If you know what the Mirror Bible is, it's Francois Dutoit. It's written from the aspect of, though we see through a glass darkly, then face to face we will see him as we are, as in a mirror. So 12:6 says this: "For every instruction," it doesn't say chastening, "every instruction is inspired by love, even as a father would discipline his sons with affection, though it might seem harsh at the time." The one I really love is Hebrews 12:11 in this. It says, "The process of education is not immediately appreciated at time. It seems to be more pain than pleasure, but it certainly yields the harvest of righteousness for the faith athlete." In verse 5, he expounds on one of the words there. "The word in Scripture that confirms your genesis in God addresses you as sons. My son, do not undervalue the loving instruction of the Lord, neither become despondent when you are corrected." And in King James, that's called, they called it chastening. The Greek word that's there blew me away when I read it. He expounds on it. He says it's the word parakletos. That's the word that John used when he said the comforter, the parakletos, comforter will come. So that even in our chastening, God takes a loving approach to us. You know, if when you've been convinced of righteousness by the Holy Spirit, we're never resentful. When the Holy Spirit does it, it's not resentful. We have tears in our eyes because we know he came to us and with a heart to see us improve, brought us to a place where we realize the truth and can start walking in the truth. I heard a dear brother, he has a church in Washington, D.C. He called it this way. He said it's blessed disillusionment. Now, if you've ever been disillusioned, you might say, why is that blessed? But here's the point he makes. When you were disillusioned, it meant previously you had an illusion about reality. But now that illusion has been dissolved, you have been disillusioned, and you see reality in truth for what it is, and therefore it's blessed. You know, even when we feel we've lost the substance of something we were hanging on to, but if it wasn't reality, we're in a more blessed place to know where we are. So, I just want to go over some practical things. So saving for emergencies. Immediately, even before you start paying down debt, even before you start attacking credit cards, you should have a minimum of $1,000 or maybe even $1,500 in a savings account. And what that takes care of is if the water pump breaks, the transmission, the water heater busts, and you've got to have the floor repaired, whatever. You have $1,500 in there to take care of emergencies. That's a minimum. Then once you get those credit cards taken care of, to really be in a foundationally safe place, you want to have between 3 and 6 months of living expenses in a savings or mutual account, someplace you can get to it. You don't want to put it in the stock market. You want to have it someplace very liquid where you can get it easy. If you lose your job, something happens, you lose your source of income, you've got 6 months to figure that out and replace it, et cetera, et cetera. It makes it, for people, for young, especially young people that are developing their careers, it makes them what I call recession proof. They can lose their job and they can be out of work for 4 months while they're trying to find another and live off that 6 months that they have tucked away, and they're spared. They're not thrown into a situation where they have to run down to the bank and throw their car title on the counter and say, I can't pay for it anymore, or et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You're in a safe place. Some terms of reference you should know about. Does anybody know what the term house poor means? Okay. House poor is when a young couple, it doesn't have to be a young couple, it can be an older couple. I shouldn't pick on young. Bite off more than they can chew. They love this house. They go into it, and the payments on the house, or they got into it okay, but then the job situation changed, and now they don't have the income to make those big payments. So all of their income, not all, but most of their income is just servicing those house payments, and they don't have the ability to breathe to do some of these other things, pay off debt or save or invest, etc. It's because they may have a beautiful house, but they're house poor. The house has made them poor. So actually, Terry and I, knowing these things, went through this in the last few years. I was working at Rackspace, and Terry is working at University of Texas as a business administrator. And our combined income, when you talk about a shovel to get income and use it for things, we had a big shovel with those two incomes together. And as you know, Rackspace went through a turnaround or downturn, and I got caught up in a layoff with a whole bunch of other people. And I immediately found some consulting work that pretty much paid even a little bit better, but we started looking at that and we started thinking the consulting work may or may not continue. So to keep ourselves in a safe place, we sold this big house we had. It was 3,000 square feet. We loved it. We didn't need it. It had 4 bedrooms. Our children are all gone. We had it because when the children came to visit, it was nice and big, had a huge backyard, etc. But, they come once a year, that kind of a thing. So what we did, we sold that big house, got another house that's about 900 square feet smaller. It's everything that we need. It's beautiful. We love it. And it's 1 story instead of 2 story. But we did that to prevent ourselves from becoming house poor. That we wanted to maintain this foundation of we know where our budgets and where our income is going, and we're going to maintain in a way that we can still maintain the generous giving that we love to do, the lifestyles we love, etc. In God's blessing. Have you heard the expression being upside down on a car? Okay. This happens quite often when, in fact, I just bought a car. The car would have been $35,000 new, but I don't buy new cars. And it's just because if you know that you get in a new car and you drive it off the showroom lot, you've immediately lost $3,000 to $5,000 just by driving it off the lot. It's now a used car. And so it had 40-some thousand miles on it, and I was able to buy it for $22,000 instead of $35,000. So $13,000 for 40,000 miles, is it worth it? Not to me. Being upside down on a car is you take a loan on a car, on a new car, you drive it off the lot, you get caught in a financial bind, you need to get rid of the car, but you can't because now your payoff on the loan might be $34,000 and the thing's only worth $29,000. You're upside down on the car. And there are ways to deal with that. And it takes some explanation. I'll say something at the end here about that. Other thing that you might get involved with is dealing with credit card collectors. And that is a nasty, nasty business. They have a debt to collect, but credit card collectors are a special breed of debt collectors. If you owe on your mortgage, people that collect for a mortgage are full of integrity. If they tell you they need to file court process, you can believe they're going to file court process. A credit card collector will come and threaten you with that day in and day out just to get you emotionally racked up. They do other things like they get a hold of other members of the family or your mother or somebody. That's why when you apply for some of these loans, give me the name of 3 relatives. The debt collectors are ever needed, they're calling your mother or your cousin saying, do you know that your cousin or your son or your daughter is a deadbeat? And then that gets back to you and your emotions just boil up. And that's their intention. They want to get you so angry that you just write a check to throw it their way, even if you don't have the money or your money should go somewhere else at the moment, to get rid of them. So, having said that, there's all kinds of things practically to deal with these budgets when those problems exist. And I say that to say there's a lot of detail in how to manage those things. Terry and I are available to counsel. We've got the full Dave Ramsey series about how Dave goes into detail about handling each one of these. We'll share the material. We will help. If you've never put a budget together and you need to, Terry and I can help with that too. So, what time is it? 8:30. So I had wanted to do something tonight, which was kind of a practical thing called a destiny exercise, but I'm going to save that for next week because it's 8:30 already. So what the destiny exercise is, when you're looking at the income side of things, you want to be able to go to work and to be able to do the things that you absolutely love to do. And this destiny exercise, it's something I saw through Lance Wallnau, and it's absolutely brilliant. And it's through a series of questions you really ask yourself and answer these series of questions, and you're able to narrow down what is it you really, really, really have the passion for, etc. So we'll go through that next week, and it's a fun exercise. But I'll leave you with that, and just mention the basket, an offering basket in the kiosk are back there if you want to give. And also, if you're listening online, you can go to spiritandlifesa.com, our home website, and you can donate by PayPal online. Thank you very much. God bless, and have a blessed week.